really thought-provoking comments. There's been some reporting recently that President Obama has extended an agreement with Israel that has been in existence since the time of President Nixon, that the United States will protect the secrecy of Israel's nuclear weapons program, which seems pretty ridiculous since it's probably the worst kept secret in the world. So I think a question comes up around the issue of, is there a legitimate reason for Iran to actually wish to have a nuclear weapons deterrent capability as a result of the fact that it's widely believed, at least, that Israel has something in the vicinity of several hundred nuclear warheads with all three elements of the capability that Greg described. And kind of corollary to that, it was very noteworthy a few months back that Israel played a very major role in killing off the nomination of Ambassador Chaz Freeman to be the head of the National Intelligence Council, and there was a pretty vicious smear campaign against him as an anti-Semite and all kinds of things like that. But do you think that's related to the fact that Chaz would have been somebody who would have pursued the honest approach to national intelligence estimates that would have gotten at some of these underlying issues, Afghanistan, maybe even the Israeli question? Thank you.
You have introduced the elephant into this room. The word Israel has not been pronounced yet, but it's a major factor here. But everybody is very nervous about saying this. Last time I testified before Congress and said the word Israel, just indicating that it was a factor in our attack on Iraq, that seems foolish in retrospect, doesn't it? We thought that attacking Iraq would make that part of the world safer for Israel. No, we really thought that. The people who made these decisions. Now, of course, it's quite different. But, I'm thinking about Senator Lugar, for whom I have some respect. I remember him being on a Sunday morning TV show, and he was asked that question, why do you think that the Iranians are hell-bent on getting a nuclear weapon? And he said, well, Israel... Israel is alleged to have some nuclear weapons. That's exactly what he said, okay? It was early in the morning, he probably hadn't had enough coffee yet. But he made the unpardonable mistake. He mentioned Israel in terms of what might be motivating Iran. Now, if Israel has 200 nuclear weapons, and if they are very, very bellicose in their rhetoric about taking out or regime change or this kind of thing, one would think that Iran might have something to fear. Now, I mentioned Robert Gates before, and he made a very unusual admission during his confirmation hearings. This was in November, December of 2006, and he said this, and I quote, it's very brief. Why is Iran motivated to acquire nuclear weapons? Quote, they are surrounded by powers with nuclear weapons. Pakistan to the east, the Russians to the north, the Israelis to the west, and us in the Persian Gulf. That's what he told the Senate committee during his confirmation hearing. Now, not all of you can see this. Iran is in green here, but look at, that's a pretty tough neighborhood there, okay? East, west, north, and south surrounded by powers with nuclear weapons, okay? Now, Gates, very rarely does this happen, but he said that Israel has a nuclear weapon, and since then, Olmert himself has admitted that. So let me just finish with two things. One is, why? Sometimes you need to quote people who are immersed in this kind of thing and actually have access to grind. Philip Zelikow, head of the 9/11 Commission, the staff at least, he said when he was asked to explain why we did Iraq, with no weapons of mass destruction, with no ties between Iraq and Al-Qaeda, this is what he said at the University of Virginia, quote, "Why would Iraq attack America or use nuclear weapons against us? I'll tell you what I think the real threat is the threat to Israel. And this is not a threat that dare speak its name. The American government doesn't want to lean too hard on it rhetorically because it is not a popular sell." Now, you all realize that Israel is our ally, right? Okay, how many don't realize that? Wow. Wow. Folks, I got news for you. Israel is not our ally. Look it up in your Webster's. Here's what Webster says: ally, a sovereign state associated with another by treaty. There is no treaty. Now, one of the congressmen we were briefing last night said there should be a treaty. Well, you know what, folks? We sounded the Israelis out on that 30 years ago. We said, how about a treaty? That would make you feel so secure, being in treaty relationship with us. Maybe you could give up the occupied territories. You know what the Israelis said? Thanks, but no thanks. We got the equivalent of a treaty. You call us an ally anyway. And treaties require clearly defined international boundaries. And the Israelis didn't want any part of that. Okay? So, let's be aware of the rhetoric. Let's be aware that these things are realities. One of the congressmen said, well, it doesn't matter that there's no treaty. Well, I think it matters. I'm sort of a strict constructionist on things like that. And for the president and others to say that we're treaty bound to spring to Israel's defense if it gets in trouble, even by its own provocation, that's really a distortion of the Constitution. It's a distortion of what George Washington warned about when he talked about passionate attachments of one country to another.
I would only add one thing to that. I think both the American public and certainly the Israeli public have every right to be indignant and outraged by the statements of Ahmadinejad and Khamenei about the Holocaust or about the state of Israel. But if indeed words do matter, then U.S. commentators have to be very careful with saying things like, we want to make sure that nuclear weapons are not introduced into the Middle East. Or we can't rely too heavily on the existential threat argument. With every sympathy for the fear that the Iranians generate in Israel, it's worth noting that there is only one state between these two that is currently under an existential threat, and that is Iran. And this was noted by Anthony Cordesman the other day in pointing out that with a few concentrations of very heavily populated cities in Iran, that Israel poses a potential existential threat to the state of Iran. Today, anyway, Iran does not pose an existential threat to Israel. It poses the threat of those dozens of medium-range ballistic missiles could deliver conventional explosives to Israel, or the Iranians could and have supplied rockets to their allies, Hezbollah in particular, in a way that threatens Israeli citizens. But we have to be careful in the words we use to describe the situation in the Middle East and not let careless use of words carry the agenda of parties not necessarily interested in helping people understand the reality.